Here we are, another week talking about the critic. And this time we are talking about the resentful critic because no one likes to be criticized. And it's so powerful to understand why this is happening, how to bring compassion to the dynamic, and ultimately to alchemize this experience for you. So let's get started.
Welcome to the I'm Perfectly Divine podcast, a place for the strong, sensitive, spiritual seeker to recognize the perfection of your human journey as a pathway to remembering your divinity and spiritual worlds through proven and grounded frameworks that support you to live in the wholeness you already are. For over the past 2 decades, I have supported people from all around the world, as well as Fortune 500 companies, to dissolve the divisions within them and live with greater empowerment and love. This podcast is an exploration of the paradoxes that befuddle us as we live our lives being both human and divine. Together, you and I, along with other experts, will navigate integrating psychology and spirituality, the divine feminine and the divine masculine, the darkness and the light, to create greater sacred union from within. I believe through your remembering that you are innately divine, that you will allow yourself to more openly shine. So let's get to it, because your unique light is needed more than ever.
Welcome back to I'm Perfectly Divine podcast. This is part 2 of us getting into how to alchemize a critic when we have a critic in our life. And I want you to have this so that you feel so free. So in the last episode, we really talked about the constant critic. And the constant critic, their psychology is operating from a place of anxiety. And you are experiencing the anxiety that they are carrying. And unknowingly, how they try to shame you into acting based on their ego's narrative, like what their ego defines as quote unquote right. And so this is a very common form of criticism that occurs. So please, if you have not listened to that last episode, please do so, because you're going to gain so much insight from it. And again, it's going to free you up. And so if you listened, you may recall that I stated for myself that when I was a critical person, I did it to feel right and to feel better about myself. And so we talked about like how to use alchemy to determine the type of person who needs to feel right. And this is a person that either innately feels like they are somehow not enough, or they are someone who feels that they have been wronged. And so this is what part 2 is about. This is what we're alchemizing. The critic that is resentful because they feel that they've been wronged. So this is what I call the resentful critic. And on the receiving end, what you will feel from this type of critic is that on some level, they don't like you. Now, they may quote unquote love you because you're family and you're supposed to love family, but there's this sense that they just don't like you. And you're not imagining things. So we're going to get into what this is about. So oftentimes, when you're on the receiving end from the resentful critic, you don't know what you've done wrong. You don't know why they're so resentful towards you. You can guess that they're holding on to something from the past. Maybe you did something wrong. You're not sure what it is. What you do feel is that each time you are with them, they seem to put you down. And there's this intention to make you feel less than. So similar to the constant critic, there's this desire for superiority. But this is not about their anxiety. This is a person who is threatened by your existence. Now you may be thinking, whoa, why would anyone be threatened by my existence? I'm a nice person or what have you, what, I'm not a threat. The reason is because this has precisely nothing to do with you. This is their projection of who you are and what you represent to them. And this is true for any critic, but especially for the resentful critic. So in their psychology, you become a representation of people who are to blame for aspects of their life that aren't working for them. And this can be a collective like experience. You become that person. And what they see in you is that this aspect that isn't working for them is working for you. And this is what makes you a threat. You're a threat to their psyche because they must make you wrong in order to avoid making themselves wrong. So resentment is this combination of both anger and envy. And you become the object of the resentful critic if they believe you harm them in some way. And what I mean by this is not like a obvious violation towards them. It's something where it's more about a slight that they have felt from you. And they blame you that they don't have something, or they blame you that you've changed something in their life. So a common example of this is a new friend enters a dynamic of friendships, a dynamic within a friendship, and that person now becomes blamed by another friend that the two of you aren't as close anymore. It can happen when a parent feels left behind because their adult child now has found their life partner. So there's ways where it's like you took something from me and they resent you for it. Okay, so that's one common way. The other way is that they are envious of you because you have something that they want and they believe you don't deserve it. So what's actually happening here? Let's get into it. So they're carrying this anger and this envy, and yet they are not taking responsibility for how they feel. Because oftentimes they have no idea. They're not even aware of their own internal feelings about themselves. They're not saying that I feel envious towards you. What they feel is blame. And so they turn to shame and blame. You are the problem. And again, what is actually happening is a projection of their own inner disappointment. So they have this disappointment towards themselves that they aren't able to receive some aspect that they feel that you have and they don't. And so for those of you who have taken my emotional empowerment courses, you know that you can feel that in order to feel anger, there has to be some level of sadness. And so, yes, they feel anger. That's the resentment that you feel, but their sadness is coming forward in the form of disappointment. So they're sad, they're disappointed in themselves subconsciously, not necessarily in their awareness, because they're choosing to hold on to a narrative that life has been hard for them or unfair towards them. And they just feel like this is the way life is. There's nothing that they can do about it. And so this to me is such a great example to witness the difference between someone willing to do the hard work, to open their hearts so they can receive, to recognize something's going on here where I'm not able to receive, and they do the hard work to receive, versus someone remaining in blame, which only closes their hearts and closes them off to ever be able to receive what they actually want, as long as their heart remains closed, as long as they remain in blame. So the reason why our ego latches on to blame is because then we get to be right. And our ego loves to be right. And so we get that kind of short-term hit that it feels good to be right when we feel internally wronged. It's just at the cost of receiving what we really want from life. But we're not able to see that. So, of course, the resentful critic is disappointed in themselves, but if instead of looking at that and understanding what's going on for them inwardly, that disappointment gets pointed right at you. You are the one that has what they want, and you don't deserve it in their narrative. Now, this is where it is important to bring compassion, because how I look at it is something has happened in their life that somewhere along the line has made them feel powerless. And maybe this isn't in all aspects of their life, but they certainly feel stuck in this aspect that your existence is demonstrating that this is a possibility. But because of their narrative, they don't feel like it's a possibility for themselves. And so the reason why I have compassion for this is because I know what it's like to be stuck. I know what it's like to believe I'm powerless. And that sucks. Because what happens is that your ego can convince you that you are taking action, and you actually may be taking action and doing things. The problem is that you're expecting a different outcome when the person taking the action hasn't changed their inner narrative. And again, I have been there. And it's so difficult because you are trying so hard. But that narrative is working against you, and things will not change on the external until you change. And so this is the reminder of the alchemical laws of as within, so without. This is also what we hear in the Bible, Proverbs 23:7. As a man thinks in his heart, so he is. I love the sacred texts of the Gospel of Thomas in saying 22. When you make the inside like the outside and the outside like the inside, then you will enter the kingdom. This is what all these texts are pointing to, the same thing. And that's why I love integrating them, because they're guiding us to know thyself so that we can receive the kingdom, which is heaven on earth. And we receive that not just for ourselves, but then to bring it to one another. So the ultimate choice for the person experiencing resentment is to decide, you know what, I need to forgive, to take accountability for my part, and move on. Because at some point you hope that there's this recognition that the only person suffering here is the one holding the resentment, right? It's the same with anger. That's why resentment is this poisonous combination of anger and envy. So it takes a lot of courage to let go of the narrative that, I've been given the short stick in this part of my life. And it isn't easy, because the ego loves to make us right, especially when we feel we've been wronged. And so what happens is then we look to the world, to the external world, for evidence. Like, I'm not just making this up. I have received the short stick, right? And the more you emphasize that narrative, the more that's what you're going to get. You receiving the short stick. Or in this case, the person who has been resenting you receiving the short stick. So they unknowingly keep recreating this. So don't get me wrong, the resentful critic may truly have received the short stick in some areas of their life. But here's the truth. We all have. There are certain areas in everybody's life where we experience a challenge. This is the human experience because it helps us to know ourselves. So the choice is for all of us to decide, am I going to cling to the short stick or am I going to let it go? And I want to be clear how much courage this takes because we make it sound so simple. And it can be simple, I guess, to just drop it. That hasn't been my experience. I tend to hold on because what happens, the reality of what happens when you let go is you are faced with your inner shame, emptiness, and the unknown. And you're lost in this murkiness of your inner world that isn't pretty at the time because you're in the shame, you're in the murkiness where you can't see the light, the essence of who you are, and you have nothing to grab onto right away. You're in the unknown. And so again, this is where I have a lot of compassion. But where does this leave you? Because while it's important for you to have compassion, you are going to need to own your boundaries to support your energy. And the important piece here is that this is the other person's resentment. It's not yours. What this ultimately means is that this is theirs to recognize and address. You can't do that for them. But the reality often is that if the person chooses to remain the victim, you're going to have to protect yourself from their jabs because they're going to keep jabbing. Because what victims do is they cling on to that victim narrative that keeps them stuck. And when you're the victim, you can't be the person that's wrong because you've been wronged. When the reality is that relationships are messy and life is messy. And it often takes two to tango, so to speak, right? That have interacted in a certain way that has caused the mess so that both sides can learn about oneself. So what are the options when you've got the resentful critic jabbing at you? Well, with someone you were close to or that you would like to be close with, I think it's being able to have a heart to heart. And you can say something like, I notice this tension between us, and I just want to open up the conversation to see if I've done anything to hurt you. I mean, that's as clear as you can be. And your job then is just to listen without trying to defend yourself. And if something comes forward, the biggest gift you could give both of you is to take responsibility for your piece of the equation and apologize. And so, you can share what you were thinking in the moment that was out of your own hurt or projections. But this is not, again, about defending yourself, and it's not about tit for tat. It's not, I share my part and now they need to share theirs. Because the thing is, they probably won't. They won't own up to their own part of this equation. And that is not the point. The point is, you will know you have stepped into your part to try to create change in this dynamic. And then the next step is up to them. Will they forgive or will they hold on to the narrative of being the victim? And that is completely out of your control. Number two, this may seem counterintuitive, but it is to compliment them, like genuinely compliment them. And again, this only can come forward if it's authentic to you. And you're never going to be complimenting someone when they're jabbing you. But this is kind of like in other conversations, it's again having that compassion for someone who isn't seeing themselves accurately. They're not seeing themselves as empowered. And so it's being able to recognize that something within inside of them that I don't quite understand has happened to them to make them feel less than, to make them feel powerless. And so I want them to know that I see them as powerful. I see them as deserving. And the more we can reflect that for them, the more that they may be able to take in that they deserve to create different choices for themselves. But we're not doing this to try to gain anything. It's just genuinely having compassion for another. All right, number three. This one I almost didn't want to share, but I'm going to share, but I want you to be very cautious about it. And that is to reiterate options and choices that other people have demonstrated when it arises naturally in a conversation. So again, this you want to be careful here because the resentful critic definitely does not want your advice. Let's be clear about that. You're the projection of their problem. But if there's other stories that come up, there can be times to reiterate how someone was able to see something differently and that changed how they showed up and offered them a different choice. And this can be something that's reinforced as something to potentially have them take in more deeply. Okay. Again, we don't want to do this from like a savior complex, but just like, oh, this may be helpful, but I really need to be conscious about how I'm sharing this. And number four is to receive their insult. Now, here's the thing for anything that is a shadow, there is light. And they're trying to jab at you and pick out shadow. But what I learned when I was young is that the whole point in them making them their jabs is to make themselves feel superior. So there was a family member when I was young who loved telling me how spoiled I was. And I would get really angry about this. I was like, I work hard, I do my, blah, blah, blah. I have my narrative. And they weren't agreeing with it. Until one day, I I just agreed with them. I was like, you know what? Yeah, I am absolutely spoiled. My life is so good, and I'm so grateful for it. And I will tell you, this person is still, part of our family. That was decades ago, and they never, ever said that to me again, even though they used to say it all the time. Why? Because what you are doing, if you really genuinely feel this way, like I can take on this jab because I see the light, the goodness to it, is that you will take out the energy of superiority. They won't feel the trigger within you energetically. So it really, you can't fake this. This has to be an energetic thing where you can own, yeah, I'm spoiled. Like on the continuum of like the blessings of life, I can take in that I'm blessed and not have shame around it. When we can do this, you aren't feeling inferior, and that's something they don't want to reiterate within you because they already feel like you're superior towards them because that's why you've been able to receive things that they haven't. So they're not going to keep saying that thing. So I think this is also great because it keeps things light. You don't take yourself so seriously, and it's just kind of like, yeah, whatever. But again, it must be authentic from you. And then number five, find the last and final one, which on some level, I hope it's something that we turn to last after trying other things, is to keep your distance. And honestly, sometimes this is the only way to hold a boundary with someone who is lost in their resentment. It's unfortunate, but you don't deserve to be someone else's punching bag. And so you've got to separate yourself from someone who keeps taking the jabs, even though you've tried to do your best to address them consciously. And the thing is that, I've had to create distance with people in my life. And at the time, it feels like this is it, like, we're done. But we can leave a window for the universe to work its magic because the divine always wants us to experience greater love and bring us back to love. So allow a space for the universe to surprise you by keeping an opening that could change between you and this person, just as long as it's not at your expense anymore. So, where I'd like to end is what all this means for us on a spiritual level. Because the spiritual gift in this is that our critics are ultimately supporting you and I to become more sovereign. So sovereignty, living with the sense of sovereignty is you living with your own personal power and authority based on a life according to your values and your standards. And so what happens when someone criticizes you is that they're questioning you and they're questioning your standards and your values and making you wrong. And this makes us, if we're willing and courageous, to do the inner work to know thyself. And so while the inner critic wants you to question yourself, instead of shrinking, you end up rising. Because what has happened through your courage to honestly self-reflect is you become clearer and clearer about your true self. And I feel I've had many critics in my life, and the gift on a spiritual level has been that it has really allowed me to both know and deeply own who I am, all of me, my beauty, my strength, my messiness, my vulnerabilities, all with love, all with compassion and respect for myself. And when we give that to ourselves, it just naturally is able to be given more effortlessly to others, because every human is doing their best to remember and embody our sacred truth. So while it is true that it can feel hurtful that your critics don't see you, and they don't, it is not personal. And that is the biggest takeaway for you. I don't want this impacting your energetic field and your emotions unless it's guiding you to know yourself, unless that's the intention. I'm getting triggered with a negative feeling about this. I'm hurt. And how can I use this as an opportunity to know myself better? And again, the reason why it's not personal is because what they don't see in you is because they can't see it in themselves. So there's no way they have eyes to see you. They don't have eyes to see themselves. And ultimately, it's not their job to see you. It's your job to see you. And that's on you. It's on each of us. So if you would like help to know yourself better and want to get into the understanding of your emotions at this core level so that you can start to alchemize them, I invite you to check out my emotional empowerment courses. And this really gets into the science to creating a different relationship with your emotions that's you're rewiring the neurons so that they become your allies, so that you're working with them. And it's really supporting you to deeply know yourself so that they become a gateway into seeing what is happening psychologically that you haven't been able to see. So I'm offering these right now at 50% off until June 21st, the solstice. And the code for 50% off is solstice in all caps. So you can check them out. I'll have the link in the show notes. Until that next time, know that there is nothing to fix, nothing to prove, just to remember. I'll see you next week.
I am so honored you have joined me today. If you enjoyed the I'm Perfectly Divine podcast, subscribe so you don't miss any of our power-filled episodes. Also, if you know another who is sensitive and spiritual and wants to dive deeper into emotions and ancient wisdom, so they too can create profound peace and fulfillment from within, please share this podcast. Thank you again for joining me, and I look forward to reconnecting with you soon.